You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, I talked to Myke C-Town. Myke is 1/5 of the Dead End hip hop crew and is the host of the wildly popular YouTube channel where he talks about vinyl, reviews, metal, and hip hop albums, and much more. In this conversation, Myke and I talk about finding punk, hardcore, and metal as a kid in the 90s, how propaganda played a role in helping him formulate certain worldviews, and then we dive into Myke's top 3 podium of songs: Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread, Apparently I'm a PC Fascist, and Resisting Tyrannical Government. You can find Myke on YouTube and all social media at the handle Myke C-Town. That's MykeCtown. And I strongly recommend you watch his videos. His vinyl collection is amazing. We had a total blast, and I really hope that you love this episode. Enjoy. Myke C-Town, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Hello. Thanks for inviting me. I'm stoked to be here, man.
It's going to be a really good time, Myke. I'm so glad that you're here as well. You are a guest that we have been sort of touching base with a lot, fairly regularly for the last 2.5 years, I think, at this point. And so the fact that we're finally doing this means a whole heck of a lot. So I'm wondering if you can just spend a moment and introduce yourself a little bit to the listeners out there who may not know you or your work.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Myke. I go by Myke C-Town. I guess the way people mostly know me is I'm a part of a group called Dead End Hip Hop, who we do culture conversations. We do album reviews and such like that on YouTube. I also have my own channel where I kind of cover other things that I'm interested in, punk, metal, politics, social issues, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, I'm just like an old dude that came from the punk scene that just happened to get a teeny bit of popularity. And, yeah, that's kind of it, I guess.
Amazing. Well, Myke, you've got a YouTube channel that I love watching. I recently loved your travel episodes where you went to Norway and Spain, but You've got 65,000 followers on your YouTube channel. Tell me a little bit about what that experience has been like for you and kind of what you get out of making that show for yourself.
It's cool. So when I was young, which I mean, we'll kind of get into that stuff a little bit later, but when I was young and I first moved to Georgia, I was kind of an outcast. I was listening to stuff that kids who looked like me did not listen to, and I didn't really have any reference to be like, oh, well, that person looks like me and likes what I like, so he's cool. I didn't have any of that. So I feel like it's kind of cool to be that for other people, to kind of be a reference point for other kind of young, kids of color who like punk rock or like metal and, are called weirdos on a regular basis. I think it's cool that they can be like, well, this guy's a weirdo and this guy likes the shit that I like and he seems to be doing all right. So maybe I'll do all right, So
yeah, totally.
That's what's exciting about having a YouTube channel.
Amazing. Well, I'm wondering about your background a little bit about finding music. You've got such a really diverse range of music that you talk about on your show, which I love. Tell me a little bit about your sort of musical awakenings.
So I always had music in the household. My mom loved music. My dad loved music. Growing up in Sacramento, California, I didn't really have a reference as far as what you're supposed to listen to. I just thought, people listened to whatever the hell they liked. So yeah, when I moved to Georgia, I was listening to stuff like Whitesnake and, right next to stuff like Vanilla Ice, you know what I mean? So, I eventually found punk through skateboarding. I had a really good buddy who we kind of found punk and hardcore together. And, he kind of just gave me this cassette and was like, this is what punk is. And it was the Dead Kennedys. Oh God, what's the one with Religious Vomit, Nazi Punks Fuck Off? The little EP. I can't think of the name of it now.
Oh my God, I can't remember either. It's been a long time since I've listened to it.
It's part of being old, man.
Dang.
This happens. But yeah. Through that, then we started going to punk shows and hardcore shows, and that's really what expanded my musical palette. I started getting into metal and through that I found goth and it was all through punk rock that I expanded my musical palette.
Yeah, nice. It was it Plastic Surgery Disasters?
Yes.
Okay,
No,
sweet.
no. That's the album.
Oh,
This
okay.
was an EP. I think it was called In God We Trust.
In God We Trust Incorporated. Yep.
Yes,
What they did is
that's
they combined that
yep,
onto Plastic Surgery Disasters later on. Love that. Okay.
yep.
Oh, I couldn't let that go. I couldn't let that Dead Kennedys thing go unresolved on the show.
Yeah,
I had to figure it out.
yeah.
So I love that you do on your YouTube channel these like sort of backgrounds of finding particular genres that you do, like your own personal history deep dives. Like you've got these like 15-minute videos where you talk about your origin story with regards to certain genres of music. And I loved that one because you do mention Propaganda in one of those videos. So tell me a little bit about your origin story for this particular band that I go into on this show.
Oh, this is interesting. So, well, first off, I've been calling them Propaganda and forever, but
That's
then I
fine.
hear you call them Propaganda, and then I forget Buddy's name that does 100 Words podcast.
Oh
Which I
yeah,
love.
Ray.
Yeah, Ray. He calls him Propaganda. So I was like, shit, have I been calling him the wrong name in 30 years? But anyways, yeah, so NoFX was one of the very first punk bands I ever heard. And I loved them. And then, I later learned that Fat Mike had a label called Fat Records, and I started just listening to any band that was on there. So, no use for a name. I loved them Face to Face. But I somehow I totally missed Propaganda at first. But then once I got into hardcore and started going to shows, and I got way more into bands that were actually like saying things with their lyrics, bands like Crass and Subhumans and whoever else. So this kind of made me stop. This is really pretentious, by the way, but I was fucking 14, 15. But that kind of made me stop listening to bands that were on Fat Wreck because I felt like they weren't really saying much. But someone later handed me a cassette of How to Clean Everything, a dub. And he was like, oh, they kind of sound like NoFX. You might like it. So I went home, I threw it on, and I fell in love. I was like, holy shit, this is exactly what I wanted. And they did sort of sound like NoFX, but they just, to me at least, they were just a bit smarter. So yeah, that's how I found Propaganda. Someone just handed me a cassette.
Amazing. I love that. That's that's a pretty common origin story. I think that you have that in common a lot with a lot of bands. So do you remember what year that was about?
Oof. That would be around when the album came out. I would think.
So like early 90s, like you were kind of like in those early days.
This was probably around 94.
Okay, sweet. Nice. Did you ever get to see them like live at all in any era of the band?
Oh man. Okay, so you ready for this one? So
I'm ready. Yeah.
So we were obsessed with them. And I remember, so a good buddy of mine used to do house shows at his house called the Ida Phi House here. And they were supposed to play at Ida Phi. I don't remember what happened, but I'm pretty sure they did not play because I did not see them there. So then a bunch of buddies of mine, we decided that we were going to drive to Alabama, which is like 2 hours away. We were going to go see them, and they were opening for somebody else. I forget who it was, but whoever it was, I didn't give a shit about seeing them. We just wanted to see Propaganda so bad.
Yeah.
So we drove 2 hours. We got there. We heard that they were playing at 8. So we're like, cool, let's go get some falafel, and then we'll go over to the show. So we got over to the show at 8:00, but it was 8:00 Atlanta time.
Oh.
So they'd already played.
Oh, man.
We were so fucking bummed that we missed them. So yeah, then that was in like, God, 90, that was around 94, 95. But I did see them afterwards. I saw them in the late 90s, and then I saw them again, maybe about 3 years ago in Atlanta.
Amazing. Did you ever see them with John K. Sampson, or was it post Sampson era whenever you finally did manage to get around to seeing him?
I want to say he already left and started doing the Weaker Thans by the time I officially well, this was late 90s.
Well, he left in mid 96. and Todd joined, and Todd's first shows were like December 96.
Yeah. So then, yeah, Todd Kowalski was playing by the time I saw them. But when they played in Alabama, um, he would have still been the band.
Yeah, John would have been there.
But we missed him.
Yeah, that changeover of time. I think that there's like a really like you can be living in Western Florida, like in that Panhandle area, like by Pensacola and stuff, and then I think you go like 20 minutes away and you're in a different time zone. Like it's a really abrupt change where people go back and forth across the time zone to like work every day. It's a really funny little spot to be.
Yeah. We were dumb kids who didn't know how time zones worked. So
amazing. Oh my God. Okay. Well, so what did you think about the more recent show a couple of years ago?
So this is the other interesting thing about me with Propagandhi. So I loved the first couple of albums, first 3 albums, and then when they went a bit more thrashy, a bit more hardcore, I didn't really like it. So I kind of I just didn't listen to them for the longest time. I was just like, I don't care about this stuff. I like the kind of bratty, snotty punk stuff they were doing before. And it was maybe about 10 years ago that a buddy of mine was talking about Propagandhi, and I'm like, I don't, they turned into like a thrashy hardcore band. I don't care anymore. And he was like, yeah, but you like thrashy hardcore. So what the fuck's wrong with you? and that's all it took, dude. Someone talking logically to me. I was like, yeah, you're right. Let me go back and revisit these albums. And then I just felt like a big, huge dipshit.
Yeah.
I hadn't been listening to them for however many years because of some stupid, childish, I want them to not change bullshit. But when I saw them a few years ago, they were amazing.
Yeah.
They played a few old songs. They played mostly, the newer stuff, but they were incredible. And it was during Victory Lap. So I was in heaven, dude. They were great.
Yeah, I was really surprised by your song selections for this episode because, I watch your metal YouTube reviews a lot. And I was like, he picked stuff that's like the least heavy material that he could have. I was like expecting you to pick like Night Letters or Rattan Cane and stuff like that, stuff that is like totally rips and is more metal oriented, but you didn't. So I was really surprised by that. And I was actually really delighted that I was like, oh, I'm actually surprised by his selections. This is great.
Yeah, I picked songs from those albums because those were really the ones that I listened to the most. Like those were the ones that I kind of grew up on. And as corny as it sounds, Let's Talk More Rock is really the one that absolutely changed my perspective on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could have definitely gone with stuff that was more riffy. But yeah, I just picked the songs that really meant the most to me.
Is Let's Talk More Rock your favorite of their records of all time?
Absolutely. That's okay. The one that if I am wherever and I'm just like, I feel like listening to Propagandhi, I'm putting on Let's Talk More Rock, and then the album's so goddamn short.
Yeah,
I'll just throw on How to Clean Everything right after it. But then it's Today's Empires. Then I just go from there.
Amazing. Okay, cool. Well, let's dive into your song selections. You've got 3 great songs that you chose for the episode. So we got like your, it's like the Myke C-Town podium finish Propagandhi discussion here. So the first one that you picked is Who Will Help Me Bake This Bread? So, before we dive into the song specifically, I'm wondering if you can tell me like your thoughts on this album kind of like as a whole, like the journey through it. You can mention other songs that you totally love before, and then we'll dive into Bake This Bread a little bit more specifically.
Okay. Yeah, sure. How to Clean Everything. It's such a fun record, even though it's very serious at times, but the music, it's fast, but it's melodic. It's fun to listen to, but it seriously has some of the smartest lyrics that I'd heard come from a punk rock album at the time. And the fact that, I'm a jackass, so I'm kind of like unserious a lot, even though I think I have kind of serious ideals, but I wrap everything in jokes. And that's what I loved about that album is they were very sarcastic. They were goofy. They were just snotty punk kids. But at the same time, they were so forward thinking, like Fuck Machine. Like that wasn't something that that I had heard at the time, them being so sarcastic, but at the same time, it's like when you sit there and you listen, it's like, no, these guys are onto something.
Yeah. Amazing. So let's talk about who will help me bake this bread. Tell me a little bit about well, first of all, tell me why you picked this song specifically.
You know what's but I guess it's always the lyrics that made me pick this song. It was the whole you can rearrange my face, but you can't rearrange my mind. That was something, so let me go here. So when I was in high school, and I'm not saying this as like a badge of honor to be cool or anything, but I was literally the only punk kid in my entire high school.
Mm-hmm.
I went to a high school in a very small southern town, and the town's called Conyers. And the only thing that town was known for was having the biggest syphilis outbreak in United States history because of my class being bored and having sex parties. I wasn't invited because I was the only punk kid at my school. So I wasn't invited to these sex parties. So it's known for that. There was actually a whole PBS special about this, by the way.
Incredible.
If you ever get bored, you look it up. It's called The Lost Children of Rockdale.
Amazing.
Outside of that, it was known for this lady that would see the Virgin Mary in the clouds and speak to people about what she saw. Other than that, there was nothing there. So kids at my high school had no idea what to do with me. I was this weird black skateboarder from California that liked punk rock. So I would get picked on every single day by just everyone,
Mm.
So the whole thing of, them kind of talking about kind of getting picked on or beat up for the ideals they had. This song really, really, really spoke to me. It was like anything that was relatively outside of the norm at my high school was an instant threat to anyone there. Like these middle class white kids and middle class black kids, they were brought up to think anything outside of like their particular group was automatically lesser than. So hearing someone say loud and proud that, animals shouldn't be killed for food or resources or anything like that, it was an instant target. They would throw chocolate milk at me. They would throw cinnamon buns at me and like, oh, take this, vegan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, the whole, you can rearrange my face, but you can't rearrange my mind. You can beat the shell about me, but you can't touch what's inside. As a teenager, I was like, these fucking guys get it,
Amazing. Yeah. Was there any like the song has like some violent imagery as well. You answer with fists, beat this shell about me. Was there ever any like violence or anything like that you were dealing with regards to like, being sort of on the fringes of this little teenage, culture?
Yeah, absolutely. I was never actually beat up, but there was this thing at our school called heart checks, which I've mentioned on Dead End before. They had never heard of this, but it's basically if you're walking down the hall and you have your arms down and your chest exposed, they would punch you in the chest as hard as they could. And they'd call that a heart check. I got heart checks pretty much every day. I'd walk down the halls in an Operation Ivy shirt, and none of them knew what that was, but they just, for some reason, they were threatened by it. So yeah, they would hit me in the back of the head while I was walking, or like I said, punch me in the chest, shove me in the lockers, But I think I got it easier than a lot of other punk kids that you hear about. Like, again, I never actually got jumped or beat up, but I was definitely violently picked on.
Yeah, I think that you might be a little ahead of me. I graduated from high school in 2002. So you might have been a little bit ahead of me in that. And I'd like to think that things get a little better as the years go on as far as like treatment of kids in school, but how I don't really know anymore,
I guess I'm going to go ahead and age myself. I'm actually quite a bit ahead of you.
Interesting.
So I graduated in 96.
Oh, okay, cool. Wow.
So the interesting thing about when I graduated is, I lived through the whole MTV discovering what punk rock is.
Sure.
It was literally from 1 year. I was the kid at school in NoFX and, crash shirts and getting picked on by jocks to literally, dude, the next year coming to school in the same clothes, and fucking jocks have mohawks.
Yeah.
Jocks are like, oh, I like Rancid, and that's their old band. Cool. And I'm like, dude, what?
Yeah.
You were literally trying to jump me fucking 9 months ago. But
Yeah.
now you want to be my friend because, you know, you discovered that Carson Daly likes Pennywise or likes The Offspring. Fuck
Yeah.
off.
Man, I love that you were like a senior in high school when Let's Talk came out, because I was a senior in high school the year that Today's Empires came out. So we're like one propaganda cycle apart as far as being seniors in high school. That is so funny to me.
Yeah,
man.
It was a very interesting time to be a teenager, an isolated teenager into punk rock.
Yeah, I definitely had it a lot easier than you because, by the time I was in middle school, like punk had already quote unquote broken, as the saying goes. So there was definitely a difference of me walking around in a Pennywise and a Blink-182 Dude Ranch shirt in 8th grade in 1998 than you had just a few years before me. Okay, so let's chat about Let's Talk More Rock a little bit. So the thing that really stands out to me about Let's Talk More Rock is the cover of the record. And I remember being in the record store, looking at the cover of the record, looking at the words going around the perimeter of the album cover itself, having no idea what really any of that meant because I was a child. Yep. But this record is a big deal. And it's arguably the most important record that Propaganda has ever made. We've talked about it on the show several times, how this might not be like my personal favorite, but I think that it's arguably the most important record. Tell me your thoughts on this one, kind of as like a musical journey. You already sort of alluded to it earlier, but like, just tell me about like why this record is like so important as far as like the mission of the record and the topics that are like enclosed in within it. And I'm just curious about your thoughts on the whole thing.
So first off, I agree with you 100%. I do think it's their most important record. It might not be their best, but it's definitely their most important. I feel like they were putting issues into the forefront that style of punk wasn't really doing that much. I mean, you had bands like Good Riddance, but for the most part, that style of punk rock being like that sonic sound was more of a fun thing, you know, like you weren't going to hear Screeching Weasel talking about these types of things.
Right.
But yeah, like you had said earlier, this came out the year I graduated high school and I was moving out of Conyers into the quote unquote real world. And I couldn't have been more excited, man. Like this was a really formative time in my life. And I owe a lot of that to this record. You know, I was stepping out, like I said, into the real world. I had all these ideas swimming around in my head that I just couldn't really make a lot of sense of. So when I got this album, and like you said, when you saw the cover, it says, I should have brought it out here. I think it says like anti-fascist, gay friendly or something like that.
Gay positive.
Gay positive. Thank you. It says gay positive, animal friendly. Yeah.
Yep.
I had that shirt.
Nice.
I had that shirt. And even like back in 96, Atlanta, that shit was not allowed. Like you see a motherfucker walking around with a shirt that says gay positive.
Right.
Oh, nah. What's wrong with you? You know? But I was proud, man. I was proud that there was a band that had all of these ideals and that they were just, you know, super loud about it. I was already heavy in the hardcore scene. So picking up any hardcore album, you're going to find a booklet full of lyrics and essays and all types of shit. So it was really cool to see a punk band on Fat Records that was doing the same thing.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, your first choice on this record is, you've got two that we're going to chat about. The first one is Apparently I'm a PC Fascist, track number 1. Yep. And I know that you're a vegan. You mentioned it earlier. So you can feel free to talk about your journey in veganism as well. Tell me a little bit about why you picked Apparently I'm a PC Fascist as one of your podium finishers.
I think I like that song so much because it's the shit that I heard when I was in high school. Now, no one knew what fascist meant in high school, so no one said that, but it was always this like, I'll say that they used a different F word, but it wasn't fascist. It was the F slur. So it was, you're a PC F slur. I got that pretty regularly throughout high school. So seeing the name of the song, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then the second they start, it's like, oh, this is totally how I had started seeing the punk scene, because by that point, I'd been going to punk shows since I was like 14, 15. And by 17, 18, I was getting a bit, discouraged. But they kind of said pretty much how I felt about the scene, coming from high school where I was shunned and isolated into finding the punk scene, the hardcore scene, where it was supposed to be all of these kids were anti-racist and they were supposed to be thinking about things in a different way. But then I would get like microaggressions from other punk and hardcore kids. And, you had cliques and you had people being just as mean and shitty as the jocks at my high school. And I don't know how involved in the hardcore scene you were, but this was during the time when like hardcore kids wearing, basketball jerseys was like a cool thing.
I remember that.
Yeah. And there was like this very machismo thing, which that was never me. I was always this sensitive mama's boy that just wanted people to get along. And, I wanted people to be good to each other, even though I could be a dick at times too, because I was young. It was just, I felt like there were just a bunch of kids that were only pretending to care about, marginalized groups because the bands said that they were supposed to. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally.
So it was just cool to hear the way Chris was talking about these things. And of course, the way it related to the way people treat animals, which is something I got more from the punk scene, where kids would be talking about rejecting the way that they were raised and fighting this system that's been put in place. But when it came down to something that I find to be very, very simple to do, which is not consuming animals, they just couldn't do it. Like, I don't know, it was weird, man. Like they would claim to be against violence, but they'd ignore the blatant violence that they were actively supporting. And I'm not trying to, I know it sounds very pretentious and soapboxy, but we're all hypocrites.
Oh yeah, totally.
We can all be anti something, but the way capitalism is set up in America, you're kind of forced to take part in certain types of brutality and violence or support systems that you don't want to. But I'm also not down with this kind of defeatist attitude that a lot of punk kids had, which is like, well, I have to buy groceries that are packed in harmful plastic, so I may as well just say fuck it to all of it. I liked how this song was presenting these ideas of like having discussions about this stuff. You call me on your shit. No, I'm sorry, I'll call you on your shit. You call me on mine. Like that was something that I felt deeply like, we have to talk about this stuff if we're going to make anything better.
Yeah, the what you just said reminds me a lot of the line from the song where it says, "And you can feign ignorance, but you're not stupid. You're just selfish. You're a slave to impulse." You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's the knowing all of these things and just having like the lack of will to follow through on that. That's kind of like what you seem to be speaking to a little bit that you were seeing in your peers.
100%, because, when I first got into punk and hardcore, it was just music, but that was when I was like 14 or 15 years old. But when I got to be a lot older, I was expecting people to be thinking about things differently and trying to actively put change. And not to shit on the Atlanta scene. Atlanta had a lot of kids that were doing a lot of good. There was Food Not Bombs here. There was a group called CAFT that was a coalition to abolish the fur trade. There were a lot of animal rights groups and pro-humanist groups or whatever. But it just got to a point after a while where it was like, oh, this person who was vegan a year ago is not vegan anymore. Or this person that was anti-racist before is now voting conservative. It's like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is going on? And I watched this stuff happen and I was just like, all right, well, the punk scene is going to shit. but at least I can put on propaganda, and it's like, yeah, Chris is talking about similar things where it's like, yeah, you're not stupid, you're just totally selfish and you don't feel like changing.
Right.
And that sucks.
How did veganism go over at home for you?
Whew, my dad was like, this is stupid. What's wrong with you? Are you gay? Those were literal statements. My mom was fine with it. She was just like, well, I'm not going to cook for you because I don't know what to cook. So yeah, if you want to do this veganism thing, go for it. But you'll have to find your own food. So being vegan in 1993, I think is when I started.
Yeah.
There was no food. Like the burgers we had, I was literally talking about this with a buddy of mine last night at the Cure Show. If you wanted a veggie burger, you had to go to the store and buy it, and it came in a box, and you had to mix it with water and fry it.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as vegan cheese. You had to make cheese on your own at your house from scratch. So I understand why my mom was like, fuck this. I'm not cooking this shit. You got to do this yourself. But
yeah,
we did it, you know?
Yeah, I love hearing interviews with people like Russ Rankin and Davey Havoc, who have been vegan for decades, where they talk about like being vegan in a touring punk band like in the 90s. And those stories are always so funny.
Yep. I went through that. I was in the band for a while, and I was the only vegan in the band. And I would literally bring boxes of canned vegetables on tour, and I just eat them raw out of the box because there was no Burger King Impossible Whopper. Yeah. There was no go to KFC and get, chicken nuggets. And even if there was back then, I wouldn't have done it anyway, because I was just like, I'm not supporting these places. But yeah, being vegan in those days was hard, really, really hard. So seeing a band like Propaganda being like, yeah, we know it's hard, but it's what's right. It was awesome.
Amazing. Well, let's chat about your number one. I kind of did your songs in the order that you said, kind of like were your 1, 2, 3 as your tops. So it seems like your top song that you picked is Resisting Tyrannical Government. Is this your favorite Propaganda song?
I don't know that I would call it my favorite song, but I would definitely call it, like we were talking earlier, I think it's probably, if I said what's the most important song to me as a person,
yeah,
that's it. Like,
okay, sweet.
That song explained in so many ways why my brain was going the way it was going.
Okay, so take me through this. So you got these lyrics here, and I'm just curious about your life story in relation to what the song is saying. Obviously, to me, it might have the best closing lines of any punk song ever written. So I'm with you on this journey for Resisting Tyrannical Government. So tell me your thoughts on this one.
Yes. I agree with you 100% about the closing lines. When I listen to this, literally as an old man, I still get chills when he says, yes, I recognize the irony. The system I oppose affords me the luxury of biting the hand that feeds. And that's exactly why privileged fucks like me should feel obliged to whine and kick and scream until everyone has everything they need. That line, I feel like, should be fucking graffitied everywhere.
Yeah.
Because that's how a lot of us should think. I hate this idea that people have, and they still have it, where they're like, well, you have a decent job, you have a car, you have money. Why are you talking about poor people? Well, because that's what the right thing to do is. Like, yeah, I do have privilege, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't, identify all of these groups that don't. It's such a weird stance that people have. Like, I won't get too deep into it, but it's like, I'll see people that will attack certain folks on the left. They'll be like, oh, well, that person has a lot of money, so they can't be a figurehead for leftist views. And it's like, no, that's not true at all. That's not true at all. Like, just because you came from family money doesn't mean you can't look at that family money and be like, this is fucked. Yeah. That other people don't have this. This is fucked that there's people on the streets that are starving. Like, you can only talk about these things if you're poor. That's stupid. That's so stupid. But yeah, this song, really put into context the thoughts that I had when it comes to that. Like, the whole idea of your voice being louder than those who you're speaking up for, yeah, sure, that's a problem, but I don't think it's a problem with the speaker if you and they can kind of recognize why they're speaking. Like, you can identify that if your social status is higher on whatever this shitty fucked up caste system that we have that's in place, if your social status is higher than someone else and you're actually willing to listen to that person or that group who this system has placed lower on the totem pole than you, and you make an effort to understand the concerns of these groups, I think it is your place to use your privilege in a way that benefits groups that don't have a voice.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like being a cis straight male, I've gotten in trouble plenty of times for coming to the defense of, LGBT folks. And that's not because I want my voice to be louder. I don't. But it's because I recognize that I'm part of the oppressive class, and everyone knows that members of the oppressive class only listen to other members of the oppressive class.
Yeah.
Like straight, cis, heterosexual dudes, most of the time are not going to listen to a trans person when they say, hey, this hurts me. They're not going to listen to any queer people when they say, hey, this hurts me, this bothers me, and you can do something to change it. They're really only going to listen to other people that they see as on the same level playing, you know what I mean? Like on the same level in this weird system that we have.
Totally. Yeah. Well, for me, another example that really jumps out is the fact that so many tens of millions of Americans have no access to health insurance or reasonable cost healthcare. And for me, I grew up and I always had those things like going to the dentist, orthodontist, doctor, totally normal. But then I moved abroad and I was like in England and Canada where there's like more of a universal healthcare system in place. And then one time I was living in the UK and I visited my parents back in the US, but I had aged out of their health insurance. So I was visiting my own country for the first time with no health coverage whatsoever. Wow. But then I had health insurance in another country that I wasn't even a citizen of. And then so ever since I had that experience of being like, wow, if I get hurt while I'm in my own country, I am totally screwed. And so now I talk about this thing all the time, like on social media with to people being like about the bankruptcy rates for lack of healthcare in the United States and things like that. And I have decent health insurance now, but I still yell about it all the time. So to me, that's kind of like my little way that I can be a part of that.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. I just think that if you know that your voice carries more weight than other people, unfairly, of course, but if you know that and you care about those other people, why are you not fucking, especially if you come from the punk scene, like, how do you not realize that it's your responsibility to fucking scream, cry, yell, fight, throw shit, whatever, until there's no reason to yell anymore? Like, how do you not, we're not talking about hip hop, but there's a rapper named Sage Francis that I always think about. Oh, awesome. I love that you love Sage Francis.
He's great.
Cool. He's a great rapper, great person, great human, but he has this line on one of his old songs. I won't say it verbatim because it might be offensive, but he basically says that I'll kill the homophobes until there's no more gay people left. And I feel like that's how all of us should think. Like, as long as these people who are just trying to live, as long as gay people, as long as queer people, as long as Black people, as long as women exist, you should be fighting anyone that is fighting them, from a human standpoint. If these people hate these groups just because they want to exist, you should be fighting them until these other groups don't exist anymore. And they're going to exist forever. So it's a roundabout way of saying, like, you need to be fighting these oppressive groups, these anti-groups for the rest of your life. That's just how it works. Oh,
man. Well, now I have to go listen to Personal Journals after we get off this call. I haven't listened to Sage Francis in a bit. And now I'm like, oh, yeah, Sage Francis. Yeah, Healthy Distrust, Personal Journals. That is the rest of my afternoon.
Yes, that makes me happy.
Well, Myke, what a fantastic conversation. I'm curious if you could summarize what Propaganda kind of means to you as a person in the world who cares about stuff. How does this band continue to inspire you throughout your entire life?
So they're definitely easily top 5 punk band for me. Those first 3 albums really did affect me in a very fundamental way. The things that they were talking about on those albums, I already had an idea of coming from the hardcore scene. But it was just the way Chris presented them. And I don't want to say it's just Chris. I know other people had hands in writing. So it's the way all of them presented this stuff. Even when you talk about an album like Today's Empires with the song Back to the Motor Leagues, I was a straight edge hardcore kid back then. And when that album came out, I'd already kind of started moving away from the straight edge hardcore scene, because it was a bunch of kids just kind of taking ourselves a bit too seriously and talking to ourselves about how we need to change certain things without putting any real action into it. And then you hear that song and they're just like, fuck off. Who cares about your shitty scene, whatever. And it's like, you know what? You're fucking right. You're fucking right. It just seems like every Propaganda album that came out, it was speaking to me personally because it was things that I was already starting to think about. Yeah. So Propaganda as a whole, there was a thing floating around on Twitter a while ago that was like, it was like, who radicalized you? And the band that I had said was Chokehold, which is another Canadian hardcore punk band. But then under it, I was like, oh shit. And also Propaganda. Like, nice. They radicalized me in the best way possible. They made me think like, hey, some of your ideas are great and I want you to keep thinking about them. Some of these other ideas you have are fucking stupid and I want you to keep thinking about them. I want you to come to, the realization that you don't have all the answers. And I don't think Propaganda presents themselves as having all the answers either. And that's what's beautiful about it. I'll call you on your shit. You please call me on mine and we can grow together and make the shit'll planet better. Like that's where my mind was when this stuff was coming out. I was like, fuck, man, like I like having discussions. I don't like debating, but I like having discussions about our thoughts. And I love that this band is playing humongous shows and they're telling kids to do the exact same thing. So yeah, this band really did. When I say change my life, I don't mean that in some weird hyperbolic dorky way. I mean it in a very sincere dorky way. Like they really did change my life.
Yep, me too. Couldn't agree more. Well, maybe if they go on tour again in the South someday, that Dead End Hip Hop can play a show with Propaganda, and you can tell Chris some of these things. So, Chris, if you're hearing it, maybe see about getting Myke involved with a show. So, Myke, tell everybody where they can find you if they want to follow along with your work, because I'm hoping that you'll gain some new fans from hearing you on the show.
Yes, really quick though. I almost shit my pants when the Propaganda Twitter account started following me. I was like, "Oh my god!" What?
Oh yeah, me too. Yeah, me too.
Holy shit! I know. Yeah, I was about to ask you if you had the same.
Oh, dude, totally. And I was talking to Adam Russell from the band Story of the Year, and he had the exact same thing happen to him when he was on the show. Because Adam and I are massive Propaganda fans, and we're both from St. Louis. And so whenever he was on the show, he messaged me with a screenshot of that Chris had followed him and he was flipping out. So yeah, it's the same thing.
But yeah, it blew my mind. I would absolutely love if they ever played Atlanta to just meet, shake hands, and just be like, dude, you have no idea. As a grown ass man, you absolutely changed the course of my life. But yeah, as far as where people can find me, I am Myke C-Town across everything. So MykeCtown. That's Instagram, that's Twitter, that's YouTube, and Patreon. I am across the board Myke C-Town. So yeah, if anybody wants to hear some of my stupid, ridiculous ramblings, or send me recommendations for cool music, or just talk about the fucking weather, man, that's where you can find me.
Rock on. Myke C-Town, thank you so much for joining me and chatting Propaganda. It's been a real pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm so used to just talking about rap music on podcasts and stuff, so it's awesome that I'm getting to talk about other shit like one of my favorite punk bands. So thank you for inviting me to do this. This has been awesome.